Parliament would be one-dimensional if made up only of people with the simplest possible finances, former Tory leader William Hague has said. As politicians publish their tax records, Mr. Hague said great leaders were not always perfect or normal, citing the likes of Churchill and Pitt. Greater transparency was here to stay, he told the BBC, but it needs to be matched by a maturity of public debate. His comments come after a row over the Prime Minister's financial affairs. David Cameron took the unprecedented step of releasing a summary of his tax return last week, following days of questions and speculation about his financial affairs after revelations about his holding in his late father's offshore fund. Chancellor George Osborne, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn and London Mayor Boris Johnson became the latest senior British politicians to publish details of their tax returns on Monday. Mr. Hague told BBC Radio 4's Today programme, "We live in an age of greater transparency and the answer is not to fight that age, it has arrived and it will come all the more." But he said a mature acceptance was needed by the public that someone's personal finances will not necessarily determine their leadership abilities. The consequence of greater transparency in tax, in medical records, whatever else it may be among leaders, is that there has to be a maturity in the public debate about those things and a recognition that the circumstances and habits of people who are effective leaders will vary greatly. And that those personal circumstances are not necessarily a good guide to how good they will be as a Prime Minister, a Chancellor, or anything else, he said. Mr. Hague said previous leaders, such as William Pitt the Younger, had chaotic personal finances but were brilliant at handling the nation's finances. And he added, "We've had leaders who had tax returns like Winston Churchill that would have been more difficult to defend in public than Prime Minister David Cameron's tax returns, but Churchill was the greatest leader of modern times. So we're going to have to bear those things in mind and not expect everybody to be perfect or everybody to be normal." He said suggested increased transparency should be tested in careful stages rather than forcing all MPs to publish their tax returns. He warned, if Parliament consisted of people who had the simplest possible personal finances, perhaps all having come through the public sector with no questions of business ownership or dividends, then you would have a very one-dimensional Parliament. The Prime Minister released a summary of earnings and tax going back 6 years after being accused by Labour of misleading the public over money he had invested in his father Ian Cameron's company, Blairmore Holdings. David Cameron is currently chairing the first cabinet meeting since the row erupted, having robustly defended his conduct and that of his father in the Commons on Monday. But Labour is continuing to press him to publish his full tax returns dating back to before he became Prime Minister and are questioning why the original investment was not disclosed in the Register of MPs' Interests.